Welcome everyone to today's webinar on communicating effectively with children. We're very fortunate today to have Anastasia Ashuris as our facilitator. Anastasia is a psychotherapist of Bellwood Health Services in Toronto. She's been working with families for over 3 years in various therapeutic settings, and she especially loves group therapy with children. Kids and Company is delighted to have a partnership with Bellwood under Edgewood Health Network. We are able to support their employees and clients with childcare, and in turn, we have access to their professionals such as Anastasia that are able to support our webinars and other initiatives. We are honored to have Anastasia here today to provide all kinds of tips and tricks on how to connect with your children and develop open communication. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to use either the question and answer or the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure that these all get addressed at the end of the webinar. Over to you, Anastasia.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Christy. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Anastasia, and I'm a family counselor at Bellwood Health Services. I'm really grateful to be here with Kids and Company. We're just going to pause quickly.
Just to get rid of that feedback.
Just some technical difficulty happening. We're all set?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
There we go.
Oh, 1 second here. Okay. All right, you can hear me all right? Okay, so yes, I'm happy to be here with Kids and Company. I do work with Bellwood Health Services. So Bellwood is a treatment center for mental health and addiction issues, and we do have a diverse range of clients. My role at Bellwood is to facilitate group therapy and psychoeducation sessions using a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavior therapy. So I'll refer to those throughout the session as either CBT or DBT skills. I facilitate our family program that we have at Bellwood for families, and I also do sessions with the inpatients, so programming for clients affected by mental health and addiction. And I work really closely with families, and I've run groups for children, as Christy said, children affected by addiction in the family, and just children with mental health issues in general. But the skills learned in this webinar will be applicable to any children, any relationships really. They're really general communication skills. So within my role, I teach a lot of emotion regulation and communication skills with children. So they're helpful for both parents to model effective communication and for children to start engaging in more assertive communication skills as they grow up. So today I just want to focus on building these communication skills in families. And communication doesn't necessarily mean proper grammar and punctuation, but rather the ability to share and receive our ideas, feelings, and beliefs freely and non-defensively. So it helps us improve our relationships with others and ensures that we are understood and vice versa. Proper communication skills are not something we are born with, so it's something we can improve upon and develop throughout our lives. So we'll be looking today at communication skills for ages from preschool to age 12. However, you'll notice for yourself what skills are more applicable with your child and their age or children you're working with, and which are not. So some of the objectives today include learning effective communication tools, learning tools for conflict resolution within families, and learning ways to model effective communication for children. So since children are like sponges, as we know, we want to make sure that we understand the impact of how we're speaking with our children and how this impacts their own learning of how to get their needs met and how they'll communicate those needs to others. So just some of the things we're going to touch on. We're going to take a look at communication roadblocks that may come up for parents. And so those moments that we don't know what to do or what to say to a child. And we'll look at tools for effective communication, some I versus you statements, nonverbal communication cues, noticing the needs of our children, and later on moving into just answering any questions you may have for us. Okay, so we'll begin with some communication roadblocks. So firstly, let's just take a look at these and just things that may happen in conversation either from a child or from yourself, that make it difficult to communicate effectively. So just taking a look, thinking to yourself, take a look at this list. We have denial of feelings, making commands, advice giving, defensiveness, judging, lecturing, pitying, blaming, threatening, criticisms, and withdrawing. So just think of some of the things that come to mind of examples of poor communication within this context, and just think of what might have gotten in the way when speaking with a child. So the answers in your mind may vary, especially for those with younger children as opposed to older children. Some of these may not apply with young kids, but just think what tends to make you furious when talking with your child, or really with anyone in general. It can be really helpful to notice these patterns we have in communicating with adults that we unknowingly get blocked with when our children are growing up. So some of these may present themselves in different ways. For instance, a child at age 7 might show commands as demanding their toy, and blaming might be something as simple as a child saying, "It's your fault that such and such happened." So just the tools for effective communication, one of the basic tools we have is mirroring. So mirroring is essentially reflecting back what you see and nothing more. So you're not adding more to what you're seeing in front of you, just using words to describe what you see is going on with your child. And this helps a child feel as though they matter, and you're really just meeting the child where they're at. So for example, let's say there's a scenario where a child begins getting upset and crying because his tower of blocks keeps falling down. A potential response might be a simple reflection of what you're seeing, saying to the child, oh no, the tower fell down, that's so frustrating. And just allowing the space for the child to feel the feeling, seeing that you're also noticing what's happening for the child without jumping to a solution or fixing the problem for the child. So in a therapeutic context, we would say a lot of what parenting does is get us jumped into solution-focused therapy. So oftentimes we jump to trying to fix the child's problem, trying to do more than we should. And oftentimes this can, well, most of the time for older children, it can possibly feel invalidating or feel like we know better than someone else. For young children, you may actually have to jump in and help. But for some situations, try and just see what you're reflecting and see if that helps the child in that situation. Another effective tool is validating. So validating is acknowledging a child's experience as true, and it does not necessarily indicate agreement, but signals that your child's perspective is of worth. So for instance, when your child says no or refuses to cooperate, this technique can be helpful. So let's say your child does not want to leave the park, despite you giving several reminders that it's time to go. A potential answer might be, you really wanted to stay and play some more. I know you're really upset with mom right now, and I totally understand. We really have to go right now, and we can come back soon because I see how much you love playing. So of course, this particular response may not work in this scenario. You may have to trial and error a bunch of different ways to say this or different methods. But it is one way that you can model validation for your child and express that what they're feeling should not be dismissed, and you do hear them and see what's going on for them. And empathizing. So another tool here is seeing the world through the eyes of a child. So you're reflecting and imagining the feelings that your child is expressing. So really just putting yourself in the child's shoes. And it can work really well for situations when a child is feeling very sad, lonely, sick, scared, and other different emotions. So for instance, let's use an example. Your child has dropped their favorite teddy bear in the mud. So a possible answer, you might say something like, oh, your teddy bear's dirty. I can tell you're really sad. When we get home, how about we clean it together? So something like this would be different than sympathy, where sympathy is something like, oh, that's too bad, that sucks. Like you're not really engaging in that understanding, that level of understanding for the child. Okay, so moving into I and you messages. So I'll first define what I mean by that. So a definition of a you statement is a statement which makes the other person responsible for your feelings. So it may attack, blame, or put down another person, which can feel discouraging and lower someone's self-esteem. So for example, a you statement could be, you make me so mad, or you're always so messy. And the definition of an I statement would be that you alone are responsible for your feelings, and the I messages let you communicate, conveying how it feels is up to you, not to the other person. So for example, when you ignore me, it makes me feel sad. So I feel sad when you ignore me. So the more respect, encouragement, and effective communication that exists in your family, the less anger and stress you'll experience. So that's what we're aiming for here. All right, so the power of I statements. So I just have a basic formula up here for I statements we can use to foster effective communication with children. So we want kids to learn to express themselves in this way to ultimately take accountability for their feelings, be able to identify their feelings, and respond assertively and clearly about what their needs are as they get older. So this basic formula starts with I feel, so stating your emotion and feeling, and then moves into when, so you're describing the situation in a neutral or objective way. And because, so this is optional, you can explain how this is affecting you, why this is affecting you in a certain way. And then I would like it if, or I want. So you're stating what you would like to see change or the action that needs to happen. So it might feel really foreign to use this formula at first and construe a sentence using this formula. It does take practice to get used to, and it is going to feel weird if this is something you're not used to. But I do challenge you to try, especially when you hit those communication roadblocks, because it is often the most effective way to communicate your perspective and elicit a similar response from your child or a child. So resistance to I statements. So we can't expect no resistance to any of these I statements, especially with kids. So although I messages or I statements can be an effective way to communicate, others may respond defensively. So some of the common responses we might get could be, so what, who cares, you're making that up in your head. So what can happen is that people may respond defensively or in another way that leads to ineffective communication. And when met with resistance, we want to engage in active listening. So active listening involves using the skills that we listed earlier, the mirroring, validating, and empathizing skills, so that you're actually hearing what's happening and able to regulate your own emotions enough to respond rather than react. So we'll touch on that a bit as well. And I want to give a quick example here of some of the resistance that might happen. So perhaps with a mother and son dynamic, let's say a mother says, I hate to see the clean living room all dirtied up as soon as you come home from school. I feel very discouraged about that after I've worked so hard to clean it up. Some of the resistance you might see from a child, such as a son, maybe the son says, I think you're too picky about keeping the house clean. And so mom might say, you feel my standards are too high and that I'm fussy. And son might say, yeah. And mother might say, well, that may be true. I'll think about that. And until I change, I feel very discouraged about seeing all my work go down the drain, and I'm very upset right now about this room. So a lot of this is identifying and taking accountability for how we feel rather than accusing someone. And I want to point out that we love to use the word and in DBT. So the part where I'm saying, I'll think about that and until I change, it expresses that, someone can hold two emotions or two things can be true at once. So it can help children broaden their scope to understand there is no right or wrong way to feel, and that two people can feel two different ways from each other and still have an effective conversation. Okay, so let's try with some scenarios just to review how this could go. So for one scenario, a father might come home and his daughter is listening to loud music with her friends. And he says to her, "You are always so loud. Why can't you be quieter?" So instead of saying this, an I statement might be, when there's so much noise in the house, I get frustrated because no one can hear what anyone is saying. So you're leaving space at the end here to respond rather than react, and trying not to accuse, just stating how you feel. And of course, things like tone, intonation might matter. So we'll get into this in a little bit as well. And another scenario, just to take a look, perhaps a mother is getting frustrated with her youngest son who is complaining while they're driving home after school. And she says to him, "You're such a whiny kid. Why can't you be more like your sister?" So instead of this statement, an I statement might be, "When you speak like that, I get discouraged because I can't understand what you need and I really do want to help you." So it has a more disarming effect and often elicits a response rather than reaction. And when we react to something rather than addressing how it's making us feel, such as saying "you" statements in this example, it often leads to reactions rather than responses. So with reactions, we will not be heard. The other person will just defend their position or act out or defend their behavior in an attempt to self-validate or prove you wrong, essentially. So we may come off as invalidating when we react as well. Okay, so just some nonverbal communication. In some studies, nonverbal communication has been shown to carry between 65 and 93% more impact than actual words spoken, especially when the message involves emotional meaning and attitudes. So these are ways that we do communicate without speaking to each other. So just thinking to yourself, how do you think your posture can communicate unspoken feelings? Are you aware of the ways you communicate nonverbally, or does it sometimes occur without thinking? And most of us can remember things like cringing as a child when your mom gave you that look. You knew it meant you're in deep trouble. She didn't have to say a word about it. And you can tell you're in trouble because the brain processes both verbal and nonverbal communication at the same time and notices when someone's words don't match their body language. So nonverbal communication includes body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions, all of which can be misinterpreted. So when these nonverbal cues are misinterpreted, it can create conflict in a relationship. It can also cause you to feel really uncomfortable around another person. However, nonverbal communication on the flip side can be incredibly reassuring, such as a warm smile thrown your way when you're trying to apologize for something, a light touch on your arm when you're sharing something difficult. These all mean something to us. So if we take a look at some of the types of nonverbal communication, oh, there we go. Perfect. Just some types of nonverbal communication. So we have body language, of course, first of all. The way you stand, the way you're holding your head, shoulders and arms, gestures that you make, so movements with your arms and hands, pointing, clapping your hands, opening them to invite a child to come towards you. Facial expressions fall under this as well. Having an inviting smile, a tired blank stare will mean something different, a frown. And your eye contact will also mean a lot. It will say a lot within that context. Your speech, so loudness and pitch, intonation, are you being lively or monotone, and noticing where your inflections are in your tone of voice. And touch, so hugs, taps on the shoulders, holding hands, soft, gently, or forceful. And interpersonal space, so how much space do you need around you to feel comfortable? And just noticing that for other people as well. Okay, so moving into noticing needs. So with noticing a child's needs, we're going to look at the behaviors of a child and relate both this behavior and how it makes us feel in the moment to what the child's need might be, what they're actually trying to communicate to us. So we'll give you about 4 examples. So this is example number 1. So behavior would be the child is interrupting or disrupting you. either the parent or someone else while they're on a phone. And the parent in this situation is likely feeling annoyed. So the child's need in this situation might be undue attention. So the ideal outcome that we would like is involvement, acknowledgement, and validation. So just thinking to yourself, what happens for you as a parent or you working with a child when you feel annoyed? And what are the behaviors of a child? And how do you react? And so usually what happens for the parent, we can have some tendencies towards nagging, coaxing, raising our voice, and doing things that the child could actually be doing for themselves. So things that you could do instead. So how can we use the tools previously discussed to address this scenario? Of course, we'd use the skills that we talked about before throughout all of these. So the mirroring, empathizing, validating, and really using your I statement. So clearly and calmly communicating how you feel and what you need and why you need it. So telling the child essentially what is acceptable and what boundaries and limits that you have as well. So we want to also give children choices and maintain consistency with our boundaries within that. So we want to encourage children to be helpful, take leadership, have them do things around the house to help out, and validating and acknowledging them for this effort. Taking time for fun and focused attention at other times. So not leaving children hungry for attention, but giving them the appropriate attention at the right times so that they're not pushing our boundaries to get the attention in this way. And they're seeing that consistently, it doesn't work to get the attention in this way. So another need, another behavior we'll take a look at. So a child refusing to comply, saying, you can't make me do this, whatever it is. So a parent in this situation or someone working with a child might feel angry. And what the child's need is that they likely want independence. So the ideal outcome here would be to foster autonomy and respectful behavior from the child. So thinking again, what happens for you when you feel angry from these kinds of situations? What are the behaviors of the child and how do you react? So usually what happens for the parent, some ineffective patterns might be giving in, disciplining, fighting or arguing, controlling. And what we can do instead is stay calm, use our reflective listening skills, be a stuck record, again, being firm in your boundaries and your needs, and letting routines be the boss. So if it applies to situations where you already have rules in place and you're sticking to those rules, you refer back to those rules, that's great. And give the child legitimate independence by making choices, decisions, contributions. So for example, what shoes would you like today? Giving them a choice between a couple pairs. Involvement in decisions with limits. So the understanding is that you are to be respected as the parent or guardian or who is working with the child. So another one, a behavior is that the child is yelling angrily or wounding. So saying something like, I hate you, you're the worst parent ever. So a parent might be feeling hurt in this situation, and the child's need is that they want justice. So the ideal outcome here is a sense of fairness or equality and communicating their feelings effectively. So thinking about how you behave or what you do when you feel hurt with a child, sometimes what can happen for a parent or someone working with a child is we can withdraw from the child, or we might use discipline in this scenario. So what does it really mean when we feel hurt? And what should you really do? So to deal with those hurt feelings would be primary, because you want to really allow the child to express themselves. And for yourself to be able to engage in that way, you may have to use a DBT skill that we call opposite action. So it's choosing to do opposite of what your action urge is. So for example, when your action urge is to withdraw when this happens, try leaning in. So try connecting with your child and asking them, maybe after some time has passed and it feels appropriate for you, what they're feeling and what is going on for them. So validate as well. Use skills to say that they feel things are unfair and you see that. Apologize for any hurt you've caused if an apology is necessary. Owning up to mistakes is also a helpful tool to model for kids so they know they don't have to be perfect. You're showing love and caring in this situation, using special time to build that relationship. And this may need some counseling help, especially if this is a pattern you're noticing. So I'll come back to that and how that can be helpful. And another need we'll look at, lastly, is a behavior where a child is perhaps playing alone and doesn't interact with other children. The parent may be feeling discouraged and helpless in this scenario. And the child's need is that they may feel inadequate. So the ideal outcome is that they can spend time alone and build their self-esteem or self-worth. So for a parent or someone working with a child in this situation, usually what can happen for a parent is that we have tendencies to go one of two extremes, either giving up or doing too much for a child. So doing too much would be doing things for the child that they could do themselves or that's their responsibility. And so how we can use the tools we discussed previously to address this would be using a lot of validating and open communication to help modeling that talking to trusted others about their feelings is helpful, and knowing that their experience is valid. And you want to stop all criticism in this scenario and encourage any efforts that are being made by the child. So staying calm and helping the child with their task if they don't have the interpersonal skills, and encourage them if they do. So you can structure tasks with small steps and set them up for success in this way without doing too much, and showing unconditional love. And as I said, you may also need counseling help in some of these scenarios if this is something you're noticing is something more disruptive in the child's life and in your life as well. So parents do need to tell kids that there's nothing that they can't work through when things like this come up, when communication roadblocks come up. Saying something like, you know, it's hard. We both kind of lost it with each other. I'm sorry for my part in that. I know it might take time, but we're going to work through this. So this can be a really healing thing for kids to hear. And it's how they know that it's unconditional love and know that this doesn't determine their worth, that they're behaving in this way. And just some reminders about listening. So these are applicable skills for listening really to anyone, not just children. So number one, stop talking. So you can listen. You can't listen if you're talking. So don't interrupt. And while you're the listener, let the speaker just continue doing the talking. And it's a good way to model that not interrupting for your child as well. Putting the speaker at ease. So help the speaker feel that they are free to talk, leaning in, using her eye contact, being aware of your facial expressions, your tone of voice. Showing that you want to listen. So look and show interest, listen to understand their point of view rather than oppose it. Removing distractions, seek a quiet space if it's possible, turning off the TV or putting your phone away. So car rides can be a great opportunity to talk with a child. Being patient, don't show impatience. Allow plenty of time for each person, even when rushed. So don't interrupt again. And manage your emotions. Emotions can interfere with the meaning we get from the words we hear. Keep your triggers under control and your mind open. Going easy on argument and criticism. They will likely react negatively, even if you win, you lose. Paraphrasing, reflecting back in the words, in your own words, the content of what the speaker has said, if you sense the person is feeling unheard. Empathizing, trying to put yourself in the speaker's place so as to understand their feelings and their point of view. And asking questions. So this can help to explore someone's needs and feelings further and shows your interest in them. So thank you for listening to this portion of the webinar. I hope this was helpful, and we will come to questions after we hear a little bit from Christy.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. That was great. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, please put them into the Q&A and or the chat function. We did get one question about the notes in the PowerPoint that we've seen today, so I will be sharing that with everyone after the webinar, so you'll have access to look back. And if we do get any questions or anything that comes up after our time here today, please feel free to email us and we'll be sure to get you in touch with Anastasia to get your question answered. So thank you again, everyone, for participating. We will be taking a month off next month from our webinar series for everyone to enjoy the holidays, and we will see everyone back in the new year. Have a great day.